Imagine waking up one morning and being told that something you own, something you saved for, worked for, kept safe in your home, is now illegal, simply because you own it. That is exactly what happened to millions of ordinary Americans in 1933. The United States government passed a law, a single executive order, that made it a federal crime to possess gold, gold coins, gold bars, even gold certificates, pieces of paper that simply represented gold you had saved. The penalty for keeping it? Up to 10 years in prison, and a fine of $10,000. In today's money, that's over $230,000. And here is the part that almost nobody talks about. Within weeks of that law passing, the same government that forced Americans to hand over their gold made a quiet decision that turned that gold into one of the greatest wealth transfers in American history. This is that story. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what happened in 1933, who gave the order, who it actually benefited, and why, 41 years later, gold ownership was quietly made legal again with almost no public announcement, no conspiracy theories, no speculation, just the documented history that somehow never made it into your school textbook. Welcome to bullion. To understand why any government would criminalize gold, you have to place yourself in America in early 1933. The country was in freefall. Over 4,000 banks had collapsed in the previous 3 years. Unemployment had climbed to 25%, meaning 1 in 4 working Americans had no job, no income, and no safety net. There was no federal deposit insurance at that time. If your bank failed, your savings simply disappeared. People were scared, and when people are scared, they do what humans have done for thousands of years. They held on to gold. Ordinary Americans were walking into banks, withdrawing their savings in gold coins, and keeping them at home under mattresses, in kitchen jars, buried in gardens, away from the banks, away from the system. And this, according to the government, was the problem. Every ounce of gold pulled out of the banking system was 1 less ounce backing the dollar. The banks were running dry. The Federal Reserve was losing its ability to expand credit. And the economy, already on its knees, was in danger of complete collapse. At least, that was the official story. Franklin D. Roosevelt had been president for just 33 days when he made one of the most extraordinary decisions in American economic history. He reached back to a law written in 1917, the Trading with the Enemy Act, a wartime statute designed to restrict financial dealings with hostile foreign nations, and he applied it to his own citizens in peacetime. On the 5th of April, 1933, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. The language was blunt, unambiguous. All persons were required to deliver, on or before the 1st of May, 1933, all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates to a Federal Reserve Bank, branch, or agency. You had less than 4 weeks. In return, you would receive $20.67 per troy ounce, the official government rate. No negotiation, no appeal, no choice. If you refused, if you kept the gold your family had saved for generations, you faced a fine of $10,000 or up to 10 years imprisonment, or both. Now, put yourself in that position. Your government is telling you, hand it over by the end of the month, at the price we decide, or go to prison. Most people complied. Millions of ounces of gold poured into Federal Reserve vaults across the country. The government had done something remarkable. Without firing a shot, Without a single court order for each individual, it had effectively nationalized the private gold holdings of an entire nation. And then it waited. Because 1 month later, when the collection was complete, a second decision was made, a quieter one that the newspapers barely covered. And that decision is where this story gets interesting. Remember that number, $20.67 per ounce. That is what the government paid you for your gold. Now, the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Signed by Roosevelt in January of that year, this act did something very specific. It raised the official price of gold from $20.67 to $35 per troy ounce, overnight. Let that sit for a moment. The government forced you to sell your gold at $20.67. Then it revalued that same gold at $35. That is a 69% increase. In a matter of months. If you had handed in 100 ounces, and many families had far more, you received $2,067. The government's 100 ounces was now worth $3,500. The difference, $1,433, was yours, your savings, your family's security. Gone. Not stolen in the traditional sense, taken legally, through executive order, through a law that you had no vote on, no warning of, and no recourse against. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is public record. It is in the Federal Register. It is in the Congressional Record. It is documented, sourced, and has never been seriously disputed by any historian. The question is not whether it happened. The question is, who knew it was coming? The gold collected from American citizens was consolidated and eventually moved to Fort Knox, a military-grade bullion depository built in Kentucky in 1936, specifically to hold it. It is one of the most secure buildings on Earth. It has also never been fully audited. The last partial inspection of Fort Knox's gold reserves was conducted in 1953. That is over 70 years ago. Since then, no fully independent body has been granted access to verify what is or is not inside. That is a separate conversation. But here is what is not a separate conversation. Executive Order 6102 applied to Americans. It did not apply to foreign nationals. It did not apply to international banks. It did not apply to the private vaults of European financial institutions, the same institutions that had been accumulating gold for centuries. While ordinary American families surrendered their coins at gunpoint, metaphorically speaking, the international banking families and institutions that held gold abroad watched their holdings appreciate 69%. Overnight. No surrender. No exchange. No $20.67. Just a 69% gain. On gold, they were never asked to give up. For 41 years, it remained a crime for an American citizen to privately own gold in significant quantities. 41 years. Then, in December 1974, President Gerald Ford signed the Gold Ownership Act into law. Gold was legal again. There was no announcement, no primetime address to the nation, no acknowledgement of what had happened in 1933 and what it had cost ordinary families. It was a quiet piece of legislation. The financial system had 41 years to establish itself. The dollar, treasury bonds, stock markets, as the only legitimate place to store wealth. The reset was complete. Gold was made illegal when it threatened the system. It was made legal again when the system no longer felt threatened. We are going to take this story one step further, to 1971. The year Nixon ended the gold standard entirely. The year the dollar was cut loose from any physical backing. And the year that changed the value of every currency on Earth, including yours. What happened in 1933 and what happened in 1971 are the same story, told 38 years apart. Subscribe. The next chapter is coming.